Hey everybody, Alan here from UAV Coach and Drone Pilot Ground School, and today, or tonight I should say, you can probably see the shadows behind me, we've got Rob Miller. He's a full-time professional photographer and licensed drone pilot out of Spokane, Washington. Rob, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. How's it going?
Very good, Alan. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Very cool. So how long have you been a full-time professional photographer? I want to start there, and I think, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Before we get into the video, I just want to sort of set the expectation for the watcher. And the purpose of this video is to kind of understand what it's like to be a full-time professional photographer, but also a licensed drone pilot. You are shooting drone videos commercially, and I've seen some of them, and they are unbelievable. I want to talk about a few of them because I have a bunch of questions for you. But that's really the goal, is to kind of explore the life and times of what it is to be in your situation, to kind of talk about the tools that you're using. You've got a beautiful website. I want to run through some of the decisions that you made and some of the clients that you work with and things like that. So let's start with that first question, which is, how long have you been a full-time professional photographer? How did you get into all of this?
Well, I've actually only been a full-time photographer for just a little bit over a year, but I've been shooting photographs professionally for almost 8 years, actually more than 8 years now. So I did it part-time to start out. I've always done architectural photography. That's primarily been my genre. And it's taken me basically 7 years to get to the point where I felt comfortable enough to go full-time in that. And obviously, that's a big step, but it's been awesome, and I should have done it sooner. I never should have waited that long. It's been amazing. But also, about a year ago, I knew that I wanted to get into aerial photography. I had done some work from a helicopter, obviously very expensive for the client, a lot of fun for me because I get to go up in the helicopter. But the video from the helicopter is not quite as good as what a drone can capture. Again, the cost to the client is very expensive, so I knew it was something I wanted to do. I had no inclination to go and get a pilot's license and a 333 exemption because of the cost primarily. And so I found a way to get started before everybody else by going out and searching out 333 exemption holders with pilot's licenses and basically hiring them to do the shoots with me. And it worked out really well because it taught me what the rules are, because they're going to follow the rules, having their pilot's license on the line, their exemptions on the line. They needed to have insurance. They needed to have all this stuff at that time as well. So I learned a lot from them, and we ran DJI Inspire 1 Pros in the dual operator setup. So I learned how to operate that aircraft. I would run the camera, the pilot would run the bird, and we learned to work well together. And I've got a couple of people that I continue to work with today for that scenario. So that's how I got my start. I got a little bit of a jump on the market from most people who are just now getting their certifications. But it's been amazing. It's so much fun, and it's so exciting. But obviously it helps to have a background in photography, and it helps to kind of know how to frame a shot, and it helps to know a little bit about cinema and how to do video pans and all that. So, but that's kind of my story. It took a long time to get where I am, and I'm certainly not where I want to be, but I'm very happy with what I've done so far in the UAV industry.
That's so great. Well, first of all, congratulations from going from part-time to full-time. I went through that decision myself in a different industry a handful of years ago, and I know what that feels like. It's exhilarating and it's terrifying. How did you? I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole here, but how did you make that decision? Like, how did you know that it was time? Was it a certain number that you were hitting and you felt financially comfortable? Was it more of a gut reaction, a chat with a significant other or business partner? Like, do you remember what that decision was like for you?
I remember it very vividly. So I had a high-paying IT job. I was 10 years into that. It's what I had gone to school for. And the reason I got into that industry is because it paid well, which is really the wrong reason ultimately. So 10 years go by, and I realized that's not what I want to do with the rest of my life. I love doing photography. I've done it on the side for almost that same amount of time. And I knew that was where I would rather be. And so it was a combination of things. I knew I didn't want to work IT. It was taking up all my time and interfering with my photography business and vice versa. And so April of 2015, is that right? April 2015? Yeah, April 2015. I went ahead and quit my high-paying IT job, and I went into the cabinetry business, building cabinetry at a local shop here. very significant pay cut, all that stuff. People thought I was crazy, but I had a better schedule. I got off at like 2 in the afternoon. I could go shoot photos. I had way more time in the evening to do it, especially in the winter when it gets dark at like 5:30 in the Pacific Northwest. I still had some time to get my photography shoots in before the end of the day. And then in July, my son was born, and that was kind of the last straw. I needed to have more time with him. I was working basically 2 jobs at that time, and the photography company, the salary there was exceeding my day job, and so at that point there was no time to basically have a day job and still have a family life. So that was the big kicker for me, was my son coming along. But looking back, again, I should have done it sooner.
No, I love that.
It's been amazing.
I can totally resonate with that. I've got a 2-month-old at home right now, and I think that a lot of people, at least that I talk to, who are interested in getting into this industry, they want to know how much money they can make, right? They're very interested in, what do they charge per hour, and what can I make per year? And I think that it's important, of course, you have to pay the bills and hit your own, personal financial goals and family goals. But that time and that flexibility is really great. And I think that, all the stress that you take on as a freelancer turned, full-time creative service professional, all of the stress that comes along with that, it ends up being worth it for that flexibility. And I don't want to undersell that flexibility by any means, because I think that's a big part of choosing to be a professional drone pilot, right? Is being able to travel and to be outside and, to operate cool machinery and get paid to do it. I sense that passion in your responses so far. So I just thought I'd comment on that.
For sure.
So how did you, were you waiting for the Part 107 regulations to come out? Like how many jobs did you do, approximately? Like what was the volume that you had done up to that point? Because you're certified under Part 107 now, but the time that you and I are having this chat, it's only been, 6 weeks, 7 weeks since the certification came out. So it's relatively new for you, but you've done, I'm looking at your site now, you've got a pretty big portfolio. So what kind of shots were you doing? What kind of clients were you getting up to this point?
It was a combination of things. And the guys that I work with and I would each bring our own jobs to the table, which was nice. And then we'd collaborate on them. And really, the difficult part was mainly we shoot a lot of real estate, and generally the budget for real estate is a lot smaller than commercial work. And so we're basically splitting an already small budget between 2 people. And so that was really the only challenging part of the past year or so in doing this, is one of us would bring a job to the table, we'd fly it together, and then we would split the profits. And that was really the biggest challenge. But what it did, and why it was worth it for me, was because I was able to build that portfolio so that by the time August 29th, I think it was, or something, I was able to get my test, and a few days later get my temporary certificate. I already had basically a full portfolio that I could rely on to continue to get business off of and go out and sell with. And so for me, it was worth it to basically make very little to nothing on most of those jobs over the past year. And I'm not saying I didn't make anything. Certainly I did, and it was for that reason worth my time. But if I had been only doing it for the money, it wouldn't have fit in with the rest of my business model. But what it did was it gave me that portfolio where I already look good right out of the gate. And there's no way I could have sold that much work between August and basically a month and a half, 2 months now. So and that was the beneficial part.
And what I like about how you described those relationships is you were on the ground, right, doing dual operator mode. So it wasn't just about the show reel, the demo reel in your portfolio. It was about getting that real world field experience and sort of having mentors. Every single job that you do, that you get under your belt, you have somebody else that you can speak to. I'm sure certain things happened during certain shoots, and you've got someone there to kind of help talk through the system. Do you recall any specific situations where you remember learning a lot, on a specific shoot? Like, what was that learning process for you?
Well, it was definitely important and very valuable to work with pilots who have experience. Both of the guys that I flew with, there was 3 of them actually, and I believe all 3 of them had military experience, and so they had that going for them. A couple of them actually flew for the military or were in some part of the Air Force. And so they not only understood airspace, they knew how to talk on a radio, They knew how to radio the tower and let them know we were in the area. They knew how to file and note them. They knew how to do all this stuff. And I learned a ton just from listening to them and kind of picking up things here and there. And a lot of that doesn't apply now to drone operators. Mm-hmm. But I have a better understanding of how the FAA works and how the local towers work and how they interact and what a FSDO is and all these acronyms that that the FAA has. So I feel for that reason too, it was another leg up in just knowledge. So by the time I took the test for Part 107, I already knew what a lot of this stuff was. And certainly I had to study, and certainly it was challenging, but it did help to learn from people who had been doing this for many years in the traditional sense. And then when I went to take my test, I was just that much farther ahead.
That's great. You made me laugh when you said acronym, because this industry is very much an acronym-driven industry. I had a lot of trouble myself wrapping my head around all the different acronyms. I had somebody email me today and say, what's the difference between a drone, a UA, a UAV, a UAS, and an SUAS? And I wrote a great response, but it's fascinating, how much people lean on acronyms in this industry, and it's confusing sometimes.
It is. I actually put an FAQ on my website, and I describe those. A drone is any one of these acronyms, basically, and everybody calls it a drone, even though that's technically a misnomer. But that's what they're calling it, so that's what we're going with. Yeah,
and I'm glad you brought that up. I love your website. I think that the FAQ section is something that every aerial service professional needs to have on their site. I mean, at least at this point of the industry, when people have so many questions. I imagine if you were to talk through some of your marketing and sales calls over the last several months, a lot of it's not necessarily objection handling, but just educating, right? Letting people know this is what a licensed pilot actually means. This is what having insurance actually means. This is the difference between System A and System B. Here's the final file that I can provide for you. There's so many questions because it's all still very new. And I think one thing that I wanted to stress, at least at this point of our interview, is that people who are starting out, become a certified drone pilot. That's certainly part of it. But you have to become an educator. You're really going to have to teach your prospects and teach your clients as you're sort of building those relationships. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a big education, and a lot of clients don't understand that their property is within 5 miles of an airport. We need to be granted access before we can go fly that. They just don't get it, and a lot of that is because so many people were flying under the radar, so to speak, illegally, that they didn't care about any of that. They didn't know about airspace or didn't care about airspace, and they would just go fly these jobs. And so that's what some of these clients are used to. They're just used to people flying whenever they want, wherever they want. Whereas if you want to do it by the book, and you can't be out there undercutting the rest of the industry either, because if you have to pay for insurance, you have to pay for your aircraft, you have probably business insurance as well as equipment insurance and liability. You have all that stuff. Upkeep on it, maintenance, travel, everything that goes along with that, and just keeping up a business in general. That's what a business owner needs to take into account. And so my price is going to be a lot higher than these guys that just bought a drone at Walmart and are going out and doing it without any licensing. And so it's a big education for us to let our clients know what it really takes to do this. And yes, I might be a lot more expensive than that guy you used last summer. And that's just going to have to be the way it is if you want quality work. So
I really respect that. Can you talk a little bit about pricing and packaging? I mean, if you feel comfortable sharing specific numbers, that's great. But if not, could you at least speak to the packaging, right? What product are you ultimately selling, right? You're not. My guess is that you're not just charging for your time and then every single project is custom. My gut tells me that you have some kind of like standard service offering because you've been doing this for so long. So what does that look like for you and your market?
That's a great question, and it is a little bit still up in the air, even though I've been doing this for a little while. Pricing is so subjective and so variable. I've got a package put together. I'm looking at it here. I've got one for real estate. I've got one for commercial real estate, and I've got one for architectural or just your traditional commercial photography. And so I kind of have packages put together. And it's interesting because every client has different needs. Some clients already have, like a real estate client might already have still photos of the house, and they just need some aerial photos. So for that, $150 to $200 is what I'm trying to get. Do I always get that? Not necessarily. Or can I add that onto a package I'm already doing and give them a little price break? Yes. And then we've also done some commercial work that's in the multi-thousands. And you can actually make a lot of money doing that, but you have to have the right equipment. You have to have the right production experience. You pretty much have to have a 2-pilot scenario where one runs the craft and the other runs the camera, because you just can't get those cinematic type of shots as well running it in single operator mode. And so those jobs, if you're doing it as a documentary or for a movie or film, those jobs pay extremely well, but they're very hard to get. You do have to know what you're doing. You have to have all your ducks in a row. You have to have your licensing and insurance, all that stuff together before you can even think of getting jobs like that. And you have to have a good looking portfolio. So you really got to start. You got to start where the market is and where you could get into it. And real estate, I think, is one of the best ways to do that. Homes are bought and sold all the time. And especially for higher end homes, which in the Spokane market is the $400,000 to $500,000 and up. Any home that they're asking that much for, we can really bring a lot to the table when we're flying through the air, getting video or photos, because it's just a whole new perspective. Usually there's land involved, or a big, pretty multi-story home, or some view of the lake or the river. It's a whole new perspective for people. So people definitely want it. It's just a matter of getting them to pay for it. Is it worth it for this property? And those are the sorts of questions we work with on realtors.
That's great. So what is your, without giving away the farm, what's your marketing and sales process like for getting new business? I mean, I know you've been a photographer for a long time. You have an existing network. You're probably very well connected in Spokane. I imagine a lot of your business is, referral based or word of mouth. But have you tried any other marketing strategies? Like, what's worked well for you over the last, few months with the drone stuff?
The thing that's worked the best for me, honestly, is SEO and just having a good website. In the summertime, obviously that's my busy season. I actually don't have a lot of time to do a lot of marketing. I've done a few things. I've done Yellow Pages, wasn't very profitable. I've done Google Ads over the years with moderate success. But the biggest thing for me is blogging and SEO, and just continually adding good content to the website, so that when people are searching for what you offer, you're just on the first page. And that's always been the best, most profitable use of my time. Over the next couple of years, I do plan on doing a lot more traditional marketing and adding a few different things to what I do as a commercial photographer. But certainly aerial photography is going to be one of the biggest parts of that. And just hoping to put myself ahead of the market and separate myself from the people that are just starting out in this. And, just kind of be a company that people can count on and that people know have good experience. So that's my marketing plan for now. But really, I'm probably not the guy to talk to about marketing, because I don't do a ton of it. I do talk to a fair amount of people at networking events and various local events around town. But I'm not doing anything on a large scale for gathering clients other than just the traditional SEO and organic search.
That's great. And just to comment a little bit on that, I have to be careful because I have a background in SEO, and I could go on a rabbit hole for about 45 minutes talking about it. But for the people listening, SEO stands for search engine optimization. And it's this idea of, in your case, you operate in a limited geographic area. I'm sure you would love to do jobs all over the world. If somebody paid you to fly to Fiji and shoot a resort property, you'd probably say yes in a heartbeat. But the reality is that you're probably doing the majority of your business in your geographic area. So, what are those neighborhoods? What are those cities? What are your target customers ultimately typing into Google to find you? And how do you take those keywords and that research and that buyer intent behind those keywords? How do you integrate them into your website? And there's a whole lot of tips and tricks to doing that. But I will say that you've got a beautiful website. It's SpokaneDronePhotography.com. I know it's separate from your former, it's rlmiller.com is your photography website.
rlmillerphoto.com.
Photo.com, that's right. rlmillerphoto.com. But we're talking about SpokaneDronePhotography.com. You've got this great FAQ section. You've done some SEO, so you're getting some inbound traffic. People are typing in, I need a Spokane drone photographer or Spokane drone photography portfolio, and you're probably showing up. Even if you live in a bigger city, if you're in Los Angeles, if you're in New York, if you're in Chicago, SEO can still work. Don't think that just because you have competitors that it doesn't work, because it can. There's just different ways to think about it. So, okay, I have to I visit my lips because I could talk a lot about SEO. Maybe you and I can have a separate conversation at some point about it.
We'll do a different webinar on that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, so let's say that you and I are kind of on a sales call right now, and you've answered all of my questions. I've got a $450,000 home in Spokane that I'm trying to sell. I'm a broker. I want to hire you to come shoot some photos. You've sold me. I've given you my thumbs up. I agree with the price. Where do we go from here? Like, do you send me questions that you need from me? Like, sort of, what does your sort of process look like from here? Does that question make sense?
Absolutely. If we haven't already discussed it, I would have gotten the address of the home and found out if we're within the FAA's airspace and where we can fly or not.
And sorry to interrupt. What tools do you use to conduct airspace research? I know that there are a ton. There's no one right tool, but I'm just curious what you use.
So for me, I like SkyVector and AirNav. Those are the two biggest ones. The Before You Fly app is great, but it's really for recreational operators. So if you just want to know what's in the area, it's going to show you absolutely everything. Some of what it shows may not actually apply to you as a 107 operator, as a commercial operator. It's really just for hobbyists. So you need to go, like SkyVector is probably my favorite. I really wish it was a little more precise with the addresses, but you can kind of compare it to Google Maps and see. And then I think the other one was AirNav. I've used that one quite a bit as well. There's tons of them out there, but if there's any question, obviously spend a little time or maybe even call your local FSDO or the FAA if you're just right on the line. It's better to err on the side of caution with that. But assuming the client and I have confirmed the airspace is clear and that we're able to fly, I do have usually some further questions for them. At this point, I probably would have asked them, are we doing just still photos? Are we doing video? Are we doing interior video of the home or just exterior flying around? Those are some of the things I would ask. And then one of the biggest things I've learned over doing this for a year is that as cool as aerial photography is, it really is just a supplement to what you're already doing. It's not meant to be a replacement for it. So if you're doing interior photographs, they still have to be really good and show the space, which is one of the things I love doing. If you're doing an aerial video, as people watch those, they're going to want to see what's inside the house, right? And so another great thing to add to this is doing interior video, which can be challenging because you might have blown out windows if there's too much sunlight coming in or your camera's dynamic range can't keep up. So I usually do those at twilight. But that's one of the things that I've found, and one of the things I'm going to start marketing more is doing that interior video so that people can fly around the house and they can look and basically go right into the front door and see what the inside of the home looks like. And I just think for real estate especially, that will just help sell a home so much more because people get a more or less walk through the house. Yeah, and sorry,
I feel the need to comment on that. I totally agree. I think that so many people want to buy a drone and shoot real estate videography, and starting from scratch. And we all start from somewhere, but I know a lot of really good drone pilots who want to start making money as soon as possible shooting aerials. And I think you can probably get a job or 2 jobs or 3 jobs, but if you want to build a long-term sustainable business, you have to think strategically about what value it is that you bring. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you could maybe make some money or make a business just doing aerials. But if you are wholeheartedly dedicating yourself to showcasing real estate, the aerial perspective is just one part of that. And being sort of a traditional, indoor real estate photographer, landscape photographer where you're doing kind of the ground level shots, it's a whole other beast, right? Knowing how to set up the home, knowing the lighting, knowing the angling, having your, your client clean the home ahead of time, setting up the bathrooms the right way, the kitchens. I mean, there's all sorts of tips and tricks to doing these shots, and it sounds like you're sort of going through that process now, which is really cool.
Absolutely. Some houses don't require it. I did one in a small town in Montana, and the view is totally the selling point of this house. The inside, it was just a crappy little house, but when you can see the mountains behind the house and see the big open fields, obviously for that house, that's what's going to sell it. But if you have a luxury custom-built home and you're shooting for the builder, they're going to want to see all the cabinetry and the hardwood floors and all that stuff in their video. And so that's one of the biggest things that I would recommend people add is don't just rely on the aerial. As cool as it is, it really needs to be just part of your entire marketing package. And same with still photos. I mean, a lot of houses I've actually told people we don't want to do aerials of because it doesn't really add anything. It actually looks better from the ground, for whatever reason. There's no view, there's ugly power lines, there's too many trees and you can't see the house. There's various reasons for that. But every house, even high dollar homes, every house doesn't necessarily need it either. So you can't be afraid to turn down work either, because you're not doing them a service if it's the wrong house for aerial.
Yep. I promised my in-laws that I would do a really nice real estate video of their house, but there's too many trees and I can't get it to look good. So you can't hardly see anything when you're 40 or 50 feet in the air.
Exactly.
So,
and the principles of photography still apply. You need to know how to frame a shot. And when you're doing architectural photography, you need your verticals to be straight. And if you get too high in the air, you're basically converging your lines the opposite way as you would if you're looking up at a building and tilting your camera. So some of the best shots I've taken are just maybe even at the roof level, slightly below, looking straight at the house. It's really helpful when you have a drop off behind the house. Maybe there's a lake view and the mountain drops off. You can just fly the bird straight out in front of the house and still keep your lines vertical and get a nice well-framed shot that you couldn't get otherwise. So it's a judgment call for sure.
Yeah, and back to what you said about working with guys who are operating legally under the 333 exemption, sort of, getting some practice under your belt and sort of having that mentorship relationship along the way. If somebody's looking to get into real estate photography or videography, they can do the same thing, right? Reach out to some well-known, Google real estate photographer your city, right? Come up with a list of 5 or 10 people, give them a call. Say that you're a drone pilot, say that you're a certified drone pilot. Maybe you do some work for them for free in exchange for shadowing them for a few weeks and learning, what it is they do. People love to talk about themselves. People love to talk about, what it is that they do. Look, here we are, and you're sort of pulling back the curtain and talking about your business. I think generally speaking, people want to help. So, if you want to learn this stuff, get out there and start shaking hands and learning it, because there is a lot of learning ahead. You can't just buy a drone and then make money. There's this whole in-between section, and you can't forget that, right? Marketing and accounting and sales and everything that goes along with it. It's an entire business structure. I found photographers generally are lone wolves, and it can sometimes be difficult for local photographers to get them to work with you or mentor you or train you, unless you're working for them, which might be a good avenue. But what I've found helpful is call a photographer on the other side of the country, or call somebody that's not in your geographical area, and see if you can pick their brain, do a webinar, phone call, whatever it may be. They're a lot of times much more eager because they're not training their competition, so to speak. And they may actually help you. You may not get the hands-on unless you travel, but it can be helpful to get your questions answered or get an opinion, or maybe have somebody mentor you. And there's a lot of good resources out there too. Obviously you've put together a lot of resources yourself for drone pilots, but there's so many great resources that people can just learn from, different videos and webinars and websites that from what people have already put together. But obviously there's nothing like the hands-on learning and one-on-one training if you can get that. So I'm not trying to shy people away, but my experience with photographers has been they're a little standoffish, kind of hold on to our trade secrets and that sort of thing. So yeah, thank you for that. That's really good. That's really good advice. Okay, so we've sold me. You've done your airspace research. How much time do you need? And am I going to be on site with you? Do we need to secure permission for any neighbors? Like, sort of, what does that next step look like for you? Absolutely. So I tend to overestimate with time, especially. If I think it's going to take 2 hours, I tell them 4. If I think it's going to take 4, I tell them 6. Sometimes we take all day, and just so the client is prepared that this can take a while, because sometimes it can. Now, most drones operate for about 10 to 15 minutes on a battery, and so you get 4, 5, 6, 7 batteries. After that, it's like if you're doing video and you get past 4 or 5 batteries, you're talking an hour of footage to make a 3-minute video. So by that time, you're just overshooting. So you can kind of gauge based on the end result. If you're filming a full-length movie or a documentary, you're going to have to film for days, obviously. But if we're talking just a real estate video, something 2 to 3 minutes long, quick sales video, I'm usually about a half hour, 30, 40 minutes of footage is probably still more than enough. And so you can kind of gauge your time based on that. I got a 15-minute battery. I maybe have an hour of flight time. I'll maybe add another 50% for battery changes and times in between and craft inspections. Maybe we're waiting for the clouds to part, stuff like that. And then if we're doing any interior photography, 2 to 3 hours for that. Exterior photography, maybe another half hour to an hour for that.
And so we can kind of gauge on that. And as you do it, you'll kind of develop a workflow, and you can better estimate the time. But if you're doing the whole package, a lot of times we'll just bill it out at a day rate, and basically this is going to possibly take as much as 8 hours. We're going to wait for the right light for everything. We're going to do some early morning twilight photography inside the house, so we don't have to compete with so much light coming in the window. Then we're going to fly the drone in the morning while we get a little bit of soft light, but the sun's out. And then we're going to take a break midday because we get that harsh direct sunlight from straight up above. And then in the afternoon, we're going to come back and do some exterior. So you can kind of gauge, once you've had a little bit of experience doing this, you can kind of gauge how to structure a day with that, so that you get really the best footage out of this time that you have to do it. And obviously the client's requirements will factor into that a lot. I've come up to jobs that I've cleared the airspace for and got everything ready, was expecting to do 10 or 12 photos of this multi-million dollar home, and I ended up doing the whole house. I ended up doing aerial photography. I ended up doing an aerial video. I did the whole package, and we had to do it all in 4 hours. And so it was a little bit of a rush job, maybe 5. But you just never know what to expect, and sometimes clients will spring that on you. Totally worth it and totally fun, but you just got to be ready for anything, basically, is what I'm saying.
Client services.
Yep, you got it.
Really cool.
Don't complain, just go do it.
Yep. And you mentioned that the average photographer is a bit of a lone wolf. Is it just you? Do you have? And the reason I ask that is you've captured all this footage. You shake hands with the client, you wave goodbye, you go home. Who's doing the post-processing? Like, what does that look like for you?
In the past, it's varied. One of the pilots that I flew with did his own. Another pilot that I fly with, I do it. And then the other one is actually a professional video production guy. And so obviously, whenever he does any projects, we completely let him edit, because it's amazing when it's done. So it really varies. Obviously, when I'm shooting for my own footage and it's just me, I do all the post-processing. I've learned a lot over the years as far as editing images, and you can do a lot with a 12 megapixel drone image. I mean, there's a lot of data there if you shoot RAW, especially. It's the video that's been a challenge for me. I just learned how to do call-outs in After Effects and do the titles and the animations and all that stuff. So that's been fun to learn, but it's definitely a learning curve there. And if you want to set yourself apart, you need to know the post-processing skills as well. Most people have used some sort of clip editor where you're cutting the clips and dropping them in a timeline and adding your music. But there is a whole other world out there of animations and text and different things that you can add, and the transitions, animated transitions and 3D transitions. And it just depends on how over the top you want to go with it. Now, if you're doing a low budget 2 to 3 minute real estate video, it may not make sense to put 10 hours of post-processing into that video, because you're making like $1 an hour by the time you've cashed that job out. But it really depends. But for me, again, it's about knowledge. So my first couple jobs that I edited, I spent a lot of time on, so that I could educate myself on how to produce a great video. And then as I add the higher dollar jobs, I've already got this experience that I can push into those and a portfolio to show it off with. And
so, what tools do you use for photo post and then for video post?
I pretty much exclusively use the Adobe suite. I've got the full creative suite, and so I use Photoshop and Lightroom for my photographs. I have some other tools as well for portraits and for different things, and plugins and a few things I've added, but primarily I just do all my editing manually. And then, sorry, I got a reminder there. Still with me?
Yeah, I still got you.
Okay, good deal. And then as far as the video editing, I do all my clip cuts in Adobe Premiere, and then I'll do my transitions, titles, and kind of the after stuff in After Effects. And so that's primarily my workflow. I know a lot of people who use Macs have different applications, but I like the Adobe suite because it can run on either platform. You can go back and forth between. If you have a Windows desktop and a MacBook Pro, you can still use both. And so that's one of the reasons I chose to go down the Adobe road, because no matter what side of the fence you're on, with computers, you can still use the suite on either one. So,
what other tools are you using in your business? Like, Do you use any kind of flight management software, logging software? You mentioned a couple of the airspace research apps, and then we've talked about some post-processing tools. But when you think about your tools that you couldn't live without in your business, and that goes for the accounting stuff, the website stuff. Like, I guess talk a little bit about some of the tools that you use to run your business.
Yeah, there's a couple different applications. AirMap is an app I have on my phone. It works pretty well. One that's cool, and I don't know if people are still searching for insurance but need to fly a flight, there's an app called Verifly, and you can purchase a one-off insurance plan for this particular flight at this particular time. I would recommend just getting full-on drone insurance, and in fact, Professional Photographers of America offers an insurance plan which now I believe can cover your drone and any liability and stuff. I haven't looked into it too much yet, but that might be a good avenue because generally PPA can get really good contracts with the companies that they work with. But until that time, if you're still looking for insurance, Verifly is a good one. You can get, I think it's either $1 or $2 million of insurance right then and there for like $10. So that's a good way to go. Obviously, the Before You Fly app is good. At least gives you an idea of where the airports are. But again, you still have to check what airspace that is as to whether or not you can fly. What else?
What do you what's your website built on?
Website's built on WordPress.
Okay.
I'm sure a lot of people use that. And then I change the template up every now and then. I went to a portfolio review 3-4 years ago, and they basically said, your site's all jacked up, it's crap. And so I more or less threw the whole design away and started over with just a fresh, clean, white background, simple logo, menus on the left side, and I've really liked that look because it kind of mimics basically the Google page or just so many of these simple, white, clean websites, and they're not too complicated, they're not too distracting. So I've had pretty good success with that. I've got a few other sites that are a little different with different colored backgrounds or full photo backgrounds and stuff. But I think my favorite is probably just the clean white look. So that's what I've gone with I think the template's called RAW, R-A-W. Okay. So, yeah.
That's cool. And just a quick comment on website design. I've designed a lot of websites, and I've helped a lot of companies go through website designs. And I think that a lot of people are intimidated by designing a website themselves or having to pay somebody thousands of dollars to design it for them. And hopefully you can comment on this, but designing it yourself shouldn't be that big of a hurdle. There are a lot of tools. WordPress is one of them. Squarespace is another one. WordPress, you probably purchased a $50 template, or you're using some sort of free template, and it just took a handful of hours to kind of read through the documentation and build yourself. But it is relatively straightforward. You're not opening up a Notepad document and writing HTML and CSS from scratch. I think the hardest part, though, and this is going to be true if you're somebody hiring a developer to do the site for you, the hardest part is going to be to make decisions. So what's your navigation going to be? What information are you going to put on your homepage? What information are you going to put on your FAQ page? And there are certain best practices, and you should be looking at other aerial service websites to sort of gain inspiration. But even if you hire a developer, they shouldn't be making those decisions for you. That's my quick rant on website design. I don't know if you want to offer any follow-up comments to that or not.
Absolutely. I'm kind of the mind where if there's anything that I can do, I'm going to do it. And I would rather learn something and spend my time than necessarily pay somebody else to do it unless I absolutely have to. Now, there are cases where my time is more valuable than doing this thing, and so I'll outsource it, like changing my oil. I used to love to change my own oil. It's not worth it anymore. I'll just take it in. But website design was something that I wanted to learn, and obviously having an IT background helped. Web design was not part of my IT background, but I taught myself how to do it. One, to help my clients out, and then two, just so I could use it personally for my own sites. And so I had a buddy build my very first site. I think he built it on Microsoft platform. It was ASPX or something.
Wow.
Yeah. And it quickly became very difficult to manage. And so I wanted to do something that I could take care of. And so I went with WordPress. It's been probably 4 or 5 years now, I think, and basically taught myself how to use it. Bought a $40, $50 template. When I want to change the look, I just go out and buy a new one. It's easy. There are some idiosyncrasies. Yes, it takes time, but if you learn that, it becomes very powerful for you, because now you're in control of whatever your website does. You're not just paying somebody else to upload to your social media or to do these things. You're actually in control of that. You can meta tag all of your images so your images show up in a Google search, because Google is essentially blind to a photograph. It doesn't know what's in it until you tag it. So just knowing stuff like that can make your SEO so much better. So not to get off on a tangent, but
no, it's music.
Really
it's music to my ears, and I have to be careful because we can start geeking out about SEO right now. One other thing that I want to say is that if you do choose to build your website yourself, and you run into hiccups, there are ways to get around it. So I'm a professional website developer, but sometimes I don't know what to do, and I want a video on the background of my homepage, but I'm not quite sure how to do it. Figure out what those questions are, what you want, outline exactly what it is that you want. Again, that's usually 80% of the battle, is figuring out what it is that you want and why you want it. And there are lots of ways around it. I use a freelance marketplace called Upwork. It's UPWORK, and you set up a profile and you can basically pitch your project and say, I have a WordPress website, here's what it looks like, here's what I want on it, and then you have thousands of people from all over the world bidding on the opportunity to have that business from you. And you can set your parameters, I only want to hire somebody in the US, or I'm okay with hiring somebody in Bangladesh or the Philippines. You can say, I want to pay somebody $30 an hour versus $5 an hour. It's really fun, and that can be a whole separate black hole that you can get lost in. But for very basic website design stuff, I use them a lot. I see a website that I like, and I show that to somebody on Upwork, and I say, hey, can we get this on my site? But can we change stuff? And how long will it take you? How much will it cost me? And usually they're pretty quick. If you talk to somebody who's a specialist in WordPress and a specialist in website development, it'll take them 10 minutes to do something that might take me 3 or 4 hours to figure out. So that's something to consider as well. I don't know if you've ever used freelancers or anything to help with your themes, because every theme is different, right? And trying to learn your theme can take some time too.
Each theme is different, and each author writes them differently. I did actually outsource the logo for Spokane Drone Photography. I was driving down the street, and I had this idea pop into my head about exactly what I wanted. So I took an old receipt from Taco Bell or something, and I scratched with a pen what I wanted, and then stuck it in the cup holder for later. And when I got home, I sent what I wanted to the designer. No revisions necessary. They nailed it the first try. Wow. And I think it was $10 or $15.
That's amazing.
It was very, very affordable. I have a friend of mine who I think asks $125 for a logo here in the US. And so this obviously was overseas, but I mean, you can't beat that price for something that the guy got right away, because he probably does hundreds of these a day. So
yep, that's great. So J.K. Rowling will go to a coffee shop and scribble Harry Potter, on a napkin, and you're scribbling your logo. So not too different. Pretty much the same thing.
You got to write down inspiration when it happens.
That's right. That's great. I used to have a waterproof notepad in my shower, and I would usually doodle, most of the time, but every once in a while I would get a good idea.
There you go.
Yeah. So, I guess my final question to you is this, and we talked about this a little bit before, but there's a big difference between doing one job, 2 jobs, being a freelance aerial photographer, and building a business. So when you think about, and I asked this question to Jason and Rob last week, but when you think about your journey, and when you think about the type of person that's going to be watching this interview, if you're still watching, awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate it. But if you think about that person, what advice do you have for them? What were those big takeaways? You already said, number one, that you wished you would have done it earlier, which is awesome, because I felt the exact same way, and I know a lot of people feel that way. But when you think about your journey, what else comes to mind? What are those big takeaways that you could offer?
The biggest thing for me, I think, would be to think big. And if you read any success book and you read anybody's story, in order to be successful, they had to think beyond where they are. And, when you think small, you usually achieve small. And when you think big, you usually achieve that as well. And so it really goes without saying, if you read any books on the subject, they're going to tell you, you need to expand your mind about where you can be. You don't just need to to be scraping the bottom of the barrel of your market, you can actually be doing very well with what it is that you want to do. And in our case, photography, flying drones, whatever it may be. And so that would be the biggest thing for me, is just, don't allow yourself to get stuck in where you are, or don't limit yourself by what you think is available. Shoot for the moon, and you just might hit the stars, as they say.
I love that.
So,
and sort of backpacking on that, this idea of imposter syndrome, right? It's like somebody calls you out of the blue and says, hey, I've got a 10 million home. Can you come shoot it for me? A lot of people's initial reaction is, no, I'm not the right person for that. I would love to be, but it's not right now. Maybe a year from now. But, you have to kind of fight that imposter syndrome and say, you know what, I'm getting this call for a reason. Like, maybe I can make this work. I'm way oversimplifying it, and that's one specific example, but hopefully that's something you can relate to as well.
I've gone through that. I've actually taken jobs that the client wasn't happy with. I haven't done that in a while, thankfully, but I've been there. But don't be afraid to do that, because it's not the end of the world. And, there are other clients who love what I do for them, even around that time when that happened. But that's probably going to happen. If you're new, you're starting out, sometimes clients aren't going to be happy. It's fine. Just keep going. You'll get it right. You'll get better as time goes on. Now, thankfully, I think it's been years since I've had a client who's even been remotely unhappy with what I've done. It's usually a few little things here and there, but you kind of get to the point where you know what people are looking for. You learn to ask the right questions, and you deliver what it is that they want, which is ultimately something that's going to make them money. If it's a real estate video, it's going to help them sell the home. That makes them money. If it's a television commercial that's selling a product or an idea, that's going to make them money, which is ultimately what we're doing with these machines, right? We're not just out there flying them for fun necessarily, although it is fun. There is always some ultimate purpose in mind when you're flying commercially, and your job is to make your client look the very best. And so that's what I always strive to do every time I go out.
That's so great. I think that's a perfect place to wrap up. This has been very, very educational. Thank you so much for your time. I certainly learned a lot, and hopefully people listening did as well. Thank you for sort of pulling back the curtain and sharing your business with us, and wishing you all the best. Where can people find more about you?
There's a couple sites, rlmillerphoto.com and SpokaneDronePhotography.com. You can look me up on pretty much any social media outlet, LinkedIn.com, Facebook, Twitter. I love Instagram, Instagram.com/rlmillerphoto, probably my favorite place to hang out. Love to share my work, love to see your work, so give me a follow and I'll follow you back.
Very cool. I think I'm going to go do that right now. I'm not a huge Instagram guy yet, but I'm trying to collect friends, so I'll reach out and say hello.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Look forward to keeping in touch and talking soon.
Thank you, Alan.